The panel on your S185 shows M5002. The front work lights still come on fine and nothing looks broken. That code was never about the bulb. It's about what the controller saw on its own output wire. The M50 group is the front light output family. 4 codes, 4 different complaints about one circuit. Error on, error off, open circuit, output failure. Those are the factory names and they're not interchangeable. By the end you'll know each meaning, the cheapest thing it usually is, and the check that proves it. But that first one, a code with the lights still working, has to make sense before any of it does. A wall switch doesn't care what happens after you flip it. The controller isn't built that way. It commands the output, then reads that same circuit back, asking whether the wire did what it was told. 2 pieces of information, what it asked for and what it measured. It compares them constantly. Every code in this family is that comparison coming back wrong. Nothing more mysterious than that. So a bulb can glow while a code sets because the controller isn't grading brightness. It's grading the circuit. First one, the factory wording is short and easy to misread. M522, front light output error ON. It isn't saying the lights are on. Read it as the output looking live when nothing asked it to be. And you can prove the machine thinks in those terms because the manual uses that vocabulary everywhere else. Short to battery, short to ground, open circuit. The same 3 phrases show up on solenoids and fans, which tells you the failures a controller can actually see on an output are a very short list. So on that first code, start cheap, a wire finding power somewhere it was never supposed to find it. A harness rubbed bare against a bracket resting on a live stud. That's tape in 20 minutes. Next rung up, anything spliced in later. An added light bar, a cab lamp, a previous owner's clever fix. Then the relay, stuck closed, feeding that circuit power the controller never asked it to send. And the worst case, checked last, the controller's own output driver, stuck on inside the box. That order matters. Most people start at the expensive end and never once look at the chafed wire. Second code is the mirror image, N503, front light output error off. Read it the other way, the controller asked for lights, and the circuit stayed dead. Nothing answered. Cheapest first again, and on this one the cheapest cause is almost embarrassingly simple. The manual flat out tells you to check for loose spade connectors in the fuse holder. A push-on terminal that backed off a hair will make a controller declare the whole circuit dead. Same with grounds, corroded or loose grounds. Throw symptoms that look nothing like a ground problem. That warning is in the troubleshooting section for a reason. Check grounds and positive leads before anything clever. If that just saved you an afternoon with a meter, that's exactly what this channel is for. Stick around. Third code, M557, front light output open circuit. This one is the most literal of the 4. The controller sees a path that doesn't complete. Somewhere between its pin and ground, the road ends. Cheapest, the bulb and its socket. A filament that opened is still the most common open circuit theirs. Next, the connector itself. The manual's own instruction is to make sure connectors are locked into place. Then look inside them because a pin pushed back in its housing looks connected and isn't. That's the one that burns hours. It seats, it clicks, it reads dead, and everything looks perfect. After that, the harness where it flexes, the loom that bends every time the lift arms cycle. Worst case is the controller itself, and the manual is clear that work belongs with authorized Bobcat service personnel. Fourth code is the odd one out M528 front light output failure. It's the family's catch-all. The controller is calling the output fail rather than naming one specific fault. Work it like the others, but expect company. These codes rarely show up alone on that screen. And that's where this gets genuinely useful because this family has neighbors sitting right next to it. The rear lights get their own set of 4, starting at M5102, worded identically, aimed at the other end. Same 4 complaints, same cause ladder, different circuit. Learn one end, you've learned both. But here's the part that actually isolates a fault, and almost nobody uses it. There's a separate family for the light relays. Front relay codes start at M492, and the rear has its own. So the controller reports the relay and the output as 2 completely different things. That's a free split in your diagnosis, handed to you by the panel before you pick up a tool. If only the output code sets, the controller is fine with the relay and unhappy with what's past it. If a relay code sets alongside it, look at what they share. A feed, a ground, a fuse. And if front and rear both light up at once, stop looking at the lights entirely. 2 independent circuits don't fail on the same afternoon. Something common to both of them did. That's usually a ground strap, a main feed, or one connector at the controller carrying the pair. Not warning, because this is where people invent knowledge and then start trusting it. You'll notice the last digits look like a pattern as you scroll other systems on that code list. Don't build a legend out of that. The manual lists every code with its own written meaning. Code systems change between machine generations, and a guessed rule is worse than having no rule at all. Look the code up. Every time. That habit is the difference between a repair and a parts swap. Now, actually getting the codes off the panel, because there's a trap in the way it displays them. If more than one service code is present, they scroll across the screen, one after another. So the first thing you see isn't necessarily the first thing that went wrong. And it gets worse. As new codes occur, the oldest code disappears off the end of the list. The newest one takes the top spot, and your history quietly falls out the back without telling you. So write them all down before you touch anything. Cranking and probing generates fresh codes. Every crank while you're poking around can push the code that actually mattered right off that screen. One more thing to check before you trust a single code on that display. The panel can report that it isn't communicating with the controller at all. If you see that, everything else on screen is suspect. Fix the conversation before you read what it says. And that same troubleshooting section keeps repeating one line, check connector pins for pushed back or bent. It shows up again and again in this manual, which should tell you how often it turns out to be the answer. So here's the whole front light family in one breath, in the order you should actually work it. One code says power's there when it shouldn't be. One says it's missing when it should be there. One says the path is broken. One says the output has simply failed, without naming which way. Cheapest to worst. Every time, connections, grounds, bulb and socket, then the relay, then the controller. And check for correct function after the repair. The manual asks for that after every adjustment. Because a code that clears on the bench and returns on the third bucket cycle isn't fixed, it's flexing. That's the family. 4 codes, 1 circuit, and a cause list you can now work top to bottom. If you keep one line from this, keep this one. The controller grades the wire, not the bulb. Subscribe if you run these machines. The traction lock solenoid family is next, and it strands people the same way. The exact specs are in the service manual linked below. Like this, if it saved you a guess.